The following program contains a topic which may not be suitable for young viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hello and welcome to Ghosts of Dufferin County and Beyond. I'm Marianne Kennedy, your host, and today we have a really exciting show ahead of us. We are going to be talking about psychic kids, sensitive kids, and everything within that subject matter. And to help us do that today, we have Liz Throp joining us in the studio, and we're so excited to have you here, Liz.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here, Marianne. Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. Liz Throp is an award-winning psychic medium who hails from St. Catharines, Ontario, and Liz is also the co-founder of Psychic Kids United. Liz, tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Psychic Kids United.
Perfect. Well, I'm a psychic medium, as you've already mentioned. I've been doing it for a little over 30 years now.
Wow.
But I didn't really go public with it until I was about 25. So that was when I kind of went, okay, I'm going to do this now. I'm going to actually take this on. So I've been doing it with the public for quite some time now. I have a show called The Gifted Ones, which can be seen on YouTube, which is all about different metaphysical topics. I have another show on YouTube called The Insiders, which I do with a good friend of mine, Amber Price, who I know you're going to be having on the show.
I sure am.
I know, it's so exciting. And then Psychic Kids United was born because when I was a child, I had so many struggles dealing with my differentness. I felt quite different from everybody else, and although I had very supportive parents with that sort of, with the psychic stuff and all of that, they didn't quite understand what that meant. So my mom would have, thoughts of things and they would happen. So we didn't really classify it as psychic, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that coupled with night terrors, I had to sleep with the TV on. I had events happening around me, visitations, that kind of thing, that were quite freaky to me as a child.
Sure.
So as I grew older, I thought, it would be really great if I could have something for children to eliminate that. And then comes along my daughter.
Okay.
Okay, and so she's 26 now, but I had to learn my own craft and how I had to understand how it worked for me. So while I was working with her and trying to understand what was going on with her simultaneously, we kind of learned together. And now I have 2 grandchildren, and they're the reason why Psychic Kids United finally kicked off. I had the idea about 20 years ago, and I finally hooked up with an amazing psychic medium, Margaret Sample, and the 2 of us had the same vision, and so we launched Psychic Kids United so that parents would have a location to learn about what it means to have a kid that's gifted, how to nurture that, how to not be in fear, because that's the biggest thing parents have, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I have some questions about that I want to ask you.
Perfect.
First thing is that I have found in my practice that it's happening more and more that clients are coming to me asking me to provide some insight and support about their kids that might be having experiences that the parents can't understand or that can't be explained. And I do find that it's happening more and more. And do you find that too?
Yeah,
okay,
for sure.
Yeah, I wondered if that was it.
I think it's also a little bit of it's accepted now, right? So when we were younger, it was kind of a taboo thing, or it was like you were considered very odd or strange if you had visions and things like that.
That's right, yeah.
So now it's a little bit more, thanks to shows like yours.
Sure.
It's an accepted thing now.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it definitely is so more so like that now.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned, Liz, that when you were younger, you had some experiences.
I did.
So can you give us an example, maybe just a couple that stick out for you that you remember?
For sure. I think the most significant one was probably my grandfather's visitation after his passing, and it was the year before my brother had passed away. So just to kind of brief it up for you, he was coming through into my bedroom and playing with the handle on the door.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't see him. I didn't physically see his apparition, but I knew it was him, and he had just passed about 3 or 4 days before that had happened.
Okay.
Now, my family was estranged from him, so I hadn't really connected with this man for probably about 2.5 years. So it was kind of like I was afraid of him, right?
Yeah.
As a child. I think I was about 9 or 8 at the time. And this door kept opening and closing, and the funny thing was I was screaming and nobody in my family heard me. Not one person heard me screaming. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden my brother, who has now since passed on, he showed up, and so did my sister, into the room, because I went to the door and I was screaming like, somebody help me. And they came to my aid, and my parents were like, you guys need to be quiet, you get to bed or whatever. And my brother fell asleep on the floor and my sister in the bed next to me, and he kept playing with the door kept opening and shutting and the handle. And at that moment, I had made a pact with my siblings at that time, and I said, if you die before me, don't visit me. Don't do this. the ideas of children, right?
Sure.
And so we all made that pact that if somebody died before the other, we promised we wouldn't bug them.
Right.
So fast forward, my brother passed the next year.
Right.
And I was really frustrated as I got older that I wasn't able to connect with him. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until probably about 5 or 6 years ago that I had that awareness that I made a pact with him. Now, he does come through for my grandchildren in a very profound way. So he'll show up. My grandson just said to me yesterday, he's like, oh, Bob's here. Emma, Bob's here.
Yeah.
So he comes along for rides and he makes things move in the house.
Yep.
And, it's very fascinating. And we'll get to the, how parents can deal with stuff like that. But
for sure.
Yeah, these are just really wonderful things and experiences to me, because they usually are our loved ones.
Usually, yeah.
Like 99% of the time.
Yeah, that's
right?
absolutely right. Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating, Liz. I love that.
Yeah.
Now, in your experience with Psychic Kids United, working with kids, working with parents, are there some sort of common experiences that young people tend to have that you recognize right away is something either psychic happening, mediumistic happening, intuitive happening? Are there some, real common experiences that you could share that you've seen across the board?
Absolutely. So one of the big standouts is kids will be talking to imaginary friends, right? So that's a big one, especially when they're quite young. So when they're not hindered by fear yet, and fear is usually brought on by the parents. Unfortunately, the parents need to own that. But usually, it's having conversations with people who you can't see.
Right.
Another one is not wanting to sleep on their own. That's a big one, and having night terrors. So just waking up. You assume they're just waking up. They've been experiencing activity in the room, and they will talk about, they will give them a name, usually like the green man or the dark woman or the white whatever. They'll give them names, and it'll be a very, they're very adamant that this exists. Yeah. And so I always tell parents, when we're seeing things like this, imagine how overwhelming that is to be woken up and there's grandma right there, or there's your uncle right there, or it could be a spirit guide. Yeah. A lot of the times it is that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fascinating because the experiences that my children have had, there's never been fear attached to it, and
because you're not afraid.
It may or may not be. Their experiences in and of themselves have always actually been quite pleasant, which is lovely, right? And so it's very easy to support that. It might not be so easy to support that if you weren't psychically aware yourself.
Yes.
But what I have found is that even though my kids' experiences are quite pleasant, lots of the people that I work with, their children's experiences are not pleasant, which sort of leads me to my next question, because one of the things that I'm most commonly asked is what specifically is happening to my child when this is going on. And of course, that's very person specific. I can't really answer that in a universal way. It depends on the particular person and what's gone on there. But the next part that comes along with that is, how do I support them through this?
Exactly.
What do you have for that, Liz?
So the number one thing that I see, because I will often interview children first with their parents, and then I will ask the parents to leave the room. Now they're just in another room, so they're not like away, and they can hear everything that's being said, but it's amazing what children will tell you when they don't think their parents are listening.
Fascinating.
They are afraid to share information with their parents, typically because their parents have shown fear on some level about it. And it's like a kind of a no-brainer. Like you're dealing with something you can't control, so that puts fear into you. And we also have, like, unfortunately, we have all grown up with scary movies and Hollywood's version of spirit.
Yes.
And I mean, I've been doing this for 30 years, Marianne. I have never experienced anything evil. I have experienced benevolent, like I've experienced like
lower
trickster,
vibration.
yeah, exactly.
Sure, yeah.
But they're controllable, and I always tell people, parents specifically, so any parent that's watching this, understand that as a human, by default, you are far superior than any spirit.
Yeah, the power of form is quite something,
it's
right?
quite something.
It's quite something, yeah.
So you have nothing to fear but fear itself.
That's right, yeah.
But when your child starts to tell you what happened, and you can imagine how your face is like walking into a room with an hysterical child.
Yeah.
You're like, what happened? Oh my gosh. And your energy already is like on the defensive. Okay. So the child will assume that this is bad. Yeah. My mom is scared.
That's right.
Or my dad is scared, so I need to be scared.
So what do they need to do? What do parents need to do when they're first encountering this?
Take a deep breath. And just recognize that this is actually a really cool thing. Your kid has superpowers. Think of them like a little, like a little superpower child. Yeah. It is actually going to help them in their life to not repress this. So to keep that open channel. And the kids are coming in from 2000 and on now. They're pretty special, right? These kids are really strong, special kids. So they're going to be game changers in the world. So we want to, encourage and really nurture these abilities and these gifts. So how do we do it? First and foremost, get educated.
Yeah.
Just educate yourself. You have an incredible program that you have here in the area that anybody could come and take. I would highly recommend that they do that. I would also recommend that they just go online and Google stuff. What does this mean? And if it goes into the scary, dark, icky parts of the web, that's usually just, no, I wouldn't take that. Yeah. I would go to somebody who actually...
Yeah, we want empowering information.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Exactly.
That's what I was looking for.
Yeah, you got it. So. Okay, that's a great spot to start there, Liz. I want to continue the conversation a little bit in the direction of... our immediate response to the child. If we come into the room and there's a panic happening, what do we present with?
Okay, so I always tell parents, ask your child who they're talking to, who is there, what are they seeing? Okay. Express, don't be panicked. Just say, well, tell me about it. What are you seeing? Okay. I can tell you, doing it with my grandkids and with my own daughter, I will be like, so tell me about it. What did you see? Who's here with us right now? Sometimes I can pick up on who's in the room, but sometimes I can't.
Sometimes you can't.
Right? Is that same for you?
Yes, it's the same.
It's funny, right?
Yes.
So sometimes it's just for them. Yep. And what they'll do is they'll get excited now. Like my grandkids are excited to tell me who's there. And they will give me great detail. Sometimes I will give them a blank piece of paper and they can draw it out. Yep. But they're very good at articulating. Well, my grandson, not so much. He had a speech delay, which is part of... We're going to be talking about crystal children. Yeah. That's part of their thing. But, there's lots of different ways that we can help them get it out.
Okay. I'm going to leave you right there just for a sec, Liz. We're going to go to break, and we will be right back after this. Welcome back to Ghosts of Dufferin County and Beyond. This episode, we're talking about psychic and sensitive kids. And if you're just tuning in, I have Liz Throp, psychic medium and co-founder of Psychic Kids United, to help us explore this topic. Liz, I remember several years ago, my daughter was maybe 4. She had just started kindergarten. And I had her being looked after by some help after school.
Right.
And she had an experience where and both of my kids are very psychic, although they wouldn't call it that.
No, it's normal for them.
That's right,
Yeah.
right? So she had an experience where she was at the sort of babysitter or daycare after school, and she was able to observe some sort of manifestive energy. For her, it looked like a blue blob moving all over the place. And so when she came to me with that, I immediately was sensitive to what she was talking about, and I listened to her.
Yeah.
And I responded to her in a way that made her feel safe.
Yes.
And so, of course, being psychic and mediumistic myself, I actually rearranged her care because it was something that I wasn't able to control because it wasn't in my own home.
Yeah.
And so what I found was that being able to hear her, letting her know that I heard her and responding in a way that empowered her, allowed her to feel like she could always share those things with me and felt like she was taken care of, because kids need to feel that. But
they do.
I also know of so many folks who, as young people, shared their experiences with their parents and the parents didn't validate it. So what do we want to say? What do you have for parents in terms of validating and accepting what the kids are talking about?
This is a big problem because a lot of parents have different religions and belief systems that they're coming in to parenting with. And so these kids are going to just turn that all upside down on them. And they will, they will persevere with their experiences. That's not going to stop.
Right.
But what it's going to do is, if you are very adamant about ignoring this, like I've had parents like, can't they just ignore it? Can't it just is there any way they can just, I'm like, well, by repressing anything that they're good at, you're setting them up for other failures.
Right.
So to me, it would be like your child is a football prodigy and you don't let them play football.
Right.
Right? Or they're like a music prodigy and you don't let them connect with music.
Yeah,
it would
sure.
be the same thing. So I think once they understand it that way, it's not that they've got anything negative connected to them. In fact, they're very in tune with a higher source, with God. So to me, it's like,
right.
You've got a special human on your hands here. Like, this is great. We need to nurture this.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's really interesting. It's fascinating, actually. A lot of the folks who come work with me as adults had experiences, were very mediumistic, very psychic as kids, repressed it because we didn't have a nurturing of those abilities.
Yes.
And actually, for a lot of them, in that time in between when they had experiences, they were open, they were aware beyond form. And when they came back to this work to sort of learn it formally, they had a lot of interesting experiences, sort of like often they'd have trouble sleeping or unexplained headaches all the time, medically checked out, all that stuff, depression, feeling like they couldn't belong somewhere, feeling like they couldn't connect. So I think that it's good to talk about that because often we're thinking about the now as parents. I don't know anything about this, I'm afraid of it, I'm going to move on and I'm not going to acknowledge this. But we need to think about sort of our growing humans, and what that equals to. And in my experience as a spiritual educator, I find that repression of the early gifts resulted in all kinds of challenges in between when someone revisits
addictions
their abilities.
are huge. And a lot of where you're seeing, and I would love someone to do a study actually on people with addictions to find out how many of them are psychically gifted.
Yeah, that would be fascinating.
Because I bet you that probably a very high percentage, 70 or more, are psychically or empathic.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Actually, for our viewers at home, can you just describe what being empathic looks like?
Yeah, sure. So it's somebody who's very, what would be classified as the norm as being overly emotional. But to me, that emotion is their superpower. Like, to be able to channel feelings and emotions on such a high level. So it would be like every time they go out in public, especially for children starting school, that's a big one for empaths. Overwhelming, because every kid that's walking into that school is uptight and nervous about the first couple of days, right?
That's right?
All the teachers are like, how are you going to get this all organized? These little empathic children are walking into the school and just being, it's information overload.
Yeah, so they're able to feel the
like
feelings of others and situations around them that don't actually originate with them.
No, 90% of the time it has nothing to do with you.
Right.
And I can guarantee you that mom or dad is an empath as well.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So they'll already have an overly, they'll consider themselves overly sensitive or too emotional. These are signs that they give themselves. And the reality is, It is not the case. They are actually, can you imagine if this world, this entire world, everybody in this world put everybody else ahead, like thought of how everybody else was feeling before they started or did anything, created any action in life. If everybody felt what everybody else was going to feel, there would be no war. It would be such a peaceful, coexisting
that's fascinating.
humanity, right?
Yeah. Now you mentioned, Liz, that kids that are becoming adults now, born in the year 2000 and onward, they're a little bit of something different. So I've heard terms like crystal child, indigo children, these types of things. Folks do talk about that an awful lot. What are these things? Help our audience understand.
So an indigo would be from, well, we give the age of 1970 and on.
Okay.
So likely you and I are indigos. Oh, I know I am for sure. I would imagine you are too, because of your power that you're changing things. So these are indigos are people who are highly in tune, highly psychic. We are pretty much protesters of anything that's not in the highest good of everyone.
Sure.
So we really will fight against or protest against things that aren't for the best of everyone.
Okay.
So another trait of us is that we are like warriors. We will work very hard. We also feel very deserving. It's one of our negative qualities, but it's not at the same time, because if you think about it, we are the ones that are starting up and launching new industry all the time, right?
Yeah.
So this is kind of what indigos are. The crystal children, these are the little ones that are coming in from 2000 and on. These kids can be recognized by their larger eyes. They have round saucer-like eyes, very magical colors, like deep blue or green or magical color like eyes. They are little mind readers. I can tell you with my grandchildren, like you probably felt that with your children.
Absolutely.
You just know, and this is one of the things you'll know, like for moms and dads out there, it's as if you just know what your child needs and when they need it, and they don't even have to speak. So a lot of these crystal kids are coming in with speech delays. They are being diagnosed with a whole host of different ailments, like they're getting titles with illnesses, and so it's not. To me, it's just they're just highly evolved children. So they're just very special, and they're very connected, and they're very in tune. They love music, but they don't like loud noises. So you'll often see crystal children covering their ears a lot. It's overwhelming, and they're not a fan of large crowds.
Okay. So if we had a parent at home tuning into our show today, and they are experiencing, being in situations where their kid needs support. However, it could be a young person, could be a teenager, that type of thing. If there was something that we could let the parents know at home in terms of, information to support them, to help them to navigate this a little bit better, to support their little person, what would you say to them, Liz?
I'm going to say that likely you are on the same path, and your child is here to get you on track as well. So I would suggest that, even coming to Psychic Kids United's website.com, and there are a number of free, courses that you can take there for teaching you, just even learning how to ground and how to protect yourself. These simple things that you and I take for granted, and people who have no concept of this, they need to learn this to help themselves and their children. But then, I always tell parents, learn with your child. Like, get involved in, and as if you were taking them to the hockey rink. You're gonna be on this team with them. So learn with them, because for some reason you've been repressing, and it's time for you to wake up as well.
That's amazing that Psychic Kids United offers this as a service to support parents.
We wanted
it's so needed.
Right?
It's so needed, right?
Yeah.
So my next question is, if we have a young person tuning into our program today, maybe a teenager, and they aren't sure, do I fit into this strange world of being sensitive or psychic? What are some of the things that you might let them know would be indicators that, hey, maybe you are sensitive, maybe you are psychically aware?
So I would say the number one thing that I definitely found with the kids I've worked with is they don't like conformity. They don't like school. They find it very difficult to be in school. They don't know what they want to be. This is like one of the number one challenges. They're like, I have no idea who I am. I don't get me. I'm so different from everybody else. So, where all their friends may fit into like a social group, they don't. They have friends in all the groups, but they don't actually fit into one. And that is epic because you can touch on so many other topics in your life.
Sure.
Don't be railroaded into believing that you have to have a known destination, because this lifetime is all about learning forever, and it's exciting, and if you just can accept that, but don't feel different or alone, because I can tell you there are so many of you out there.
Yeah, which sort of opens up this other topic to speak about is connecting with community.
Yes.
Because, you know, for years and years, you know, decades, hundreds of years, thousands of years, you know, those of us who've been psychically gifted, we have always been sort of on the outskirts of normality in society. And so that makes us, and I find it today, even today, whether you're aware of the history of psychics and mediums or not, you are impacted by the sort of stigma that follows us.
So true.
And so that sometimes makes folks a little bit hesitant in acknowledging the gifts that they have. And I have found that, and I assume you have too, I've found that when we can connect with community and experience outward belongingness, it can be incredibly transformative.
Oh,
you know, and to feel like you're not alone as well, right?
Yes.
And like I don't, you know, I may not fit into a box, but I do belong.
You do belong.
Yeah.
There's definitely communities everywhere that can be found. So just Google your community, spiritual connections, something along those lines, and you will find it. If you can't find anything in your community, touch base with me at Psychic Kids United, and I will find you somewhere to connect.
That's amazing.
But we're trying to create that community within Psychic Kids. We haven't launched that part of it yet, but we are getting there. So hopefully by the end of this year, we'll have that.
That's super.
Up and running. I know.
Thank you so much, Liz, for being here. At home, if you have any other questions, connect with Liz at Psychic Kids United. She's a great resource, and I know you'll really find it valuable and a big contributing factor to your life if this is part of your reality. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next episode.